your career, 2 decades into your career, this film represents several firsts for you. Perhaps the most notable one in that it's not just about a female protagonist, but told from a female point of view. Can you talk about that decision? Why a woman, why a female point of view for this particular story?
I had seen in, I think it was 2008 or 9, I can't remember now, I had seen a performance of an opera called Il Trittico, which is by Puccini in LA. The two tragedies, it's a triptych. The two tragedies were directed by William Friedkin, and the comedy was directed by Woody Allen. The middle one was called Sor Angelica, and it was told from the female perspective. And I spent the better part of the 60 minutes of the operetta weeping. And I realized, or I thought, that there was something extremely beautiful about exploring melodrama from a female protagonist's perspective, because all of a sudden I would be free from the constraints of what I might call macho posturing, male behavior, all that stuff, and get straight to the emotional heart of it. And I don't mean that, you know, women are more emotional. That's not what I mean. What I mean is culturally we say masculine and feminine, the traits that we assign to those qualities, those words. And I just thought I could cut out all of the trappings of male behavior and just try to explore the emotion of it and to do something very operatic. Not melodramatic, but a melodrama. So that was really the inspiration for it. And I found it quite rewarding, actually liberating.
I know you've drawn on autobiographical elements in your other films. Can you talk about the ways in which you did that for The Immigrant?
Well, the movie is a strange combination of the Puccini operetta that I just talked about and family stories that had been told to me really from the beginning. My grandparents came through Ellis Island in 1923, and their entire history was quite well documented. We had all the paperwork and so forth. The name was Greichestein, and was shortened. They shortened it to Gray. By the way, it's a bit apocryphal. You know, this idea that the customs guy would change the names. That would never happen. The people themselves would change the names out of embarrassment. My grandparents told me all these stories. Of course, you know, that we didn't know what a banana was. We ate it like, you know, just bit into it. And of course, that wound up in all those sorts of details. But what was really kind of an interesting thing for me was that it was not like the typical immigration story. You know, when I saw movies about the American dream, they always seemed to me like, I came to America and it was fantastic and I loved it. And the truth is that my grandparents spoke really no English till the day they died, didn't really assimilate at all, and there was a tremendous melancholy to especially my grandfather, who used to talk about how he missed the old country, which I never understood. I mean, my grandmother's parents were beheaded by Cossacks, so I never understood what he was missing, really. But I found it interesting that he still had this pull for this place. And to me, it meant that the immigration experience was a bit more complicated than America's great. So that was one of the moods that I was trying to impart. And so many of the stories about, you know, my grandmother telling my father to me, translating to me about the trip on the boat and how dirty it was and how the men were very aggressive with the women and all that stuff wound up in the film. And I just tried to bring that mood to the movie. And my grandparents, by the way, do make a cameo appearance in the film. And she has this little locket, and the left side is her sister, the actress, the right side is my grandparents.
So in a way, you could almost look at this film as providing a historical or genealogical context for your other films, which deal with immigrant families and ethnic families in Attleboro, New York.
You know, I had never thought about that, Dennis, at all. And then when I started showing the film, people were like, oh yeah, it's like a prequel. And then it becomes very obvious. But it was not a conscious thing at all.
Could you, maybe Joaquin, you can weigh in, I'd like to hear you both. Well, if you feel like it, but you've worked together since the Yards. Was the process any different this time, given that it was, in some ways, a different type of film?
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to answer that. I don't know how it was different. I mean, I think every film is. I like this isn't working, is it? Or you get real close. Yeah, I don't know. Every film is different. I really don't. I don't remember. I'd love to give you examples of how it's different, but I can't think of anything.
So untrue. You were such a different actor now than you were then.
Maybe that's true, James. I'm just not aware of how so. But thank you for your interest.
Well, I can say that Joaquin has taught me a very valuable lesson, which is to be very process-oriented. We were just talking about process-oriented, like not to think about result, but to enjoy the doing of it, which is not so easy when you're in a narcissistic position like directing. You know, it's a very egotistical, narcissistic thing, and I've learned a lot of lessons from him. I think that I've sort of, that's one of the things that's changed, at least I think. You don't see that at all?
As well said, James.
I'll ask one more question before we open it up. Maybe you could both talk about the process of research. It's very detailed for a period piece, even though I know you didn't make it with a huge budget. Can you talk about reference points that you use? I don't know if there were any reference points that you used for your character. It seems like the photography of the period might have informed the look of the film, for one thing.
Well, the photography of the film was all based on two things, really. It was based on these things called photochromes, which are, they're sort of like fake color photographs. They're sort of they use hand dyes, they dye them by hand on glass, and they basically make it look like color. These were a series of types of photographs they took about 1905 to about 1920. So the look of the film is based on that. And it's also based on, you know, it's all this, everyone says to me, oh, it's like Vilmos Zsigmond and Gordon Willis and all that. But the truth is that it just came from two things. One is the huge amount of soot, coal, all that stuff burned in the air, basically cut the light and always made it kind of a yellowish thing as opposed to bright blue skies. Huge amount of pollution. And the other thing was, you know, when you light things by gaslight, they take on a kind of yellow ochre hue. So you could light it a different way with fluorescence, but it would be totally ahistorical. You know, I was very obsessed with trying to get the details right because in candor, you know, I had made another film which I think I used a television commercial that was 2 years out of date or something from, you know, 2 years earlier or something. And I got raked over the coals for it by friends and critics alike, and I thought, I mean, I have these friends from New York say, that commercial didn't play anymore after 1989, what are you doing? So I became, on this movie, I was like, I'm not gonna make that mistake. And of course, there's tons of mistakes, I'm sure, anyway, and I'm sure there'll be some IMDb goofs thing, you know, about how I do something like it. But yeah, not just the stories from my own family, but certainly Luc Sant's book, Low Life, was a big influence, and I spent a lot of time talking to the librarian at Ellis Island. He became my best friend, you know. And we tried to get the Enrico Caruso concert as accurate as we could, you know, based on all the stuff that I had gone through in the archives there. And it's really a big challenge, but you have to do it in order to sustain the suspension of disbelief, you know.
And in terms of the actors, did you show them anything? Have them read anything?
I did have a 1912 prostitution manual, which I based all your dialogue on, like Lady Astor, all that is based on actual stuff that I had gone through. But I don't know how much I think you just made it very personal. I don't know about research.
Ricketts.
What?
Ricketts. I became obsessed with Ricketts, but it didn't really have a place in the film. I kept trying to get it in. That was the only thing that I wanted. But it just wouldn't work. We talked about all of the research I did.
You learn something new every day.
We actually talked about it a number of times.
Well, we talked about afflictions. I mean, in a way, I think we softened it really quite a bit, because the truth is that actual tenement life was worthless. I mean, the tenement that we built, which is based on of course, the tenements of the day, and you can see the tenement museum on Orchard Street, which is just great, was much, much smaller than where we shot, because, which was on the stage we built. because if it were the same size, you couldn't put the crew and the camera in there. So I had to make that a little larger. I mean, the tenements were rife with vermin. Everybody had typhus, basically, so there was a lot of, I decided that I didn't want the movie to be about that, you know. It's not an anthropological study.
All right, we'll take some questions.